A serious mistake. That's how Ankara described recent remarks by French President Emmanuel Macron. The French leader, who was speaking with African youth on the sidelines of the COP27 summit in Egypt, accused three countries, including Türkiye, of engaging in imperialism in Africa. Macron specifically blamed China, Russia and Türkiye, saying they were engaging in actions that were far worse than those of France. Omer Celik, a spokesperson for the Türkiye's ruling AK Party, said Macron's remarks reduced France's foreign policy to animosity towards Türkiye. He also highlighted France's own colonial past on the continent and its current military footprint that critics argue is fueling anti-French sentiment. On Wednesday, Macron confirmed the end of the Barkhane military operation in the Sahel region, which began over a decade ago. He acknowledged the move came due to the negative consequences of its military actions in the region. So is France conceding that its policy in the Sahel was a failure? And does it have a new approach to tackle security challenges in Africa? And now for more, I'm joined by Collins Nweke in Brussels. He is a former Belgian politician and an Africa affairs analyst. And Jacques Relon, he's a senior fellow at the Global Policy Institute and joins me from Saint-Malo in France. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you on the program. Before we start our discussion, I just want to play what exactly Macron said at the COP27 summit. Let's have a listen to it.
Mais je le dis aussi pour nous-mêmes, parce qu'on a tendance nous-mêmes à nous flageller et en quelque sorte à nous attaquer nous-mêmes sans regarder que est-ce que les Chinois, les Russes, les Turcs font beaucoup mieux que les Français ou autres en Afrique? Ils font 10 fois pire que nous. Certains ont été eux-mêmes colonisateurs et puissances impériales.
So, Collins, why is Macron so uneasy over the growing presence of China, Russia and Türkiye across the continent?
On the one hand, Macron is trying to decry the blame game, but on the other hand, he's actually using that blame game to make the point that he's trying to make. Now, there is absolutely no doubt about the fact that France sees a need to rejig its strategic priorities, and every country of the world has a right to do that. But you don't do that by actually trying to disparage other countries. Take, for instance, Turkey, that Macron talked about. Turkey, as far as we're aware of, has not colonized any country in Africa. As a matter of fact, if anything, they are making very genuine effort to actually start off a very strategic relationships with African countries that is mutually beneficial. Whereas for France, it's a different story altogether. So somehow they are being caught up in the past unholy practices they carried out in Africa.
So, Jacques, what's your take on it? Macron, after accusing China, Russia and Türkiye of pursuing an imperialistic agenda, said those countries are doing things 10 times worse than what France did. What was he hinting at? And does that seem to be a bit of an exaggeration, given France's colonial past and its military operations across the continent?
Yes, it can be seen as a bit of an exaggeration, as you say, but it is undeniable that France is very worried at the growth of anti-French feeling, which has been developing in the populations of Africa, of the ex-colonies of France, and this anti-French feeling have been whipped up, and is quite well documented, by social networks influenced and organized mostly by three countries, as he highlighted on the 1st of September at the Ambassadors' Conference: Russia, China, and Turkey. And it's true that Turkey also is playing its part in whipping up anti-French feelings in the region. And it's quite understandable because we know that these countries are very interested in developing their influence in that part of the world where France was once very dominant, but is no longer is. Now countries such as China especially are having very good relations and benefiting from this treasure chest that Africa is. And many countries want to be involved in Africa due to its mineral resources and so on, and are trying to increase their influence in the regions. and many are trying to provoke instability, as
Yes.
highlighted by the many coups that take place. Instability in the region is seen by these newcomers to Africa as an opportunity.
Macron, after accusing China, Russia, and Türkiye of pursuing an imperialistic agenda, said those countries are doing things 10 times worse than France did. So what did he mean by that? And does that seem to be a bit of an exaggeration, given France's colonial past and its military operations across the continent?
Well, as a matter of fact, yes, this is high-level politics playing out here. The thing is, if France is being accused of, one unholy practice or the other in Africa, I think it is up to France to either apologize for anything that they may have done wrong, or if those, accusations are wrong, they should provide evidence to prove that they are wrong. But ultimately, I think what matters is that, in the relationship of the next century, mutual interest has got to be at the bottom of it. Now, the term is dead and buried, where, national interest is translated or defined from the narrow perspective of one country, leaving the other country out. When you define national interest now, it also involves the interest of your partner countries, because in the end, it is that sort of relationship that is sustainable. France has left Africa, but hasn't quite left Africa, by way of granting them independence. So
yes,
blaming the social media for bringing out those elements of France, past is not going to solve the issue. France should either apologize or change its course.
So, Jacques, how different is Turkey's engagement with Africa than that of France? I mean, what industries are feeling growing trade ties and cultural ties between Turkey and Africa?
Turkey has started, its influence in Africa started taking an interest in Africa, from what I understand, about 15 years ago. And in the meanwhile, I know that President Erdogan has visited about 30 countries in Africa. And the first country where he already moved in was Somalia. And Turkey initially comes into a country in Africa, providing help, humanitarian assistance, and commercial deals. But lately, it's been increasing, going for providing soft power, humanitarian and economic, to more hard power. We see that now it's trying to also develop its arms sales in this Africa. And we've seen this process now. It took place in Somalia. Now that Turkey is having the same strategy in other countries in Africa. And it is quite amazing, the change of stance. 15 years ago, I think, 20 years ago, I think that Turkey had 9 embassies in Africa.
Yes.
Today it has 43. The trade with Africa 20 years ago was 4 billion euros. Today it's 26. So, and at the same time, there's also the influence. Turkey has the image of a country which is not a colonial power, contrary to France, which has colonized the region. And there's also Turkey is also basing its influence on Islam. Islam is spreading throughout West Africa. And Turkey would like to see itself as the leader of the Sunni Muslims in Africa, as opposed to the other country which is trying to develop its influence there, which is Saudi Arabia, especially, and the Emirates and the Gulf.
So, Collins, how deep does mistrust between France and African countries run? Have countries like Russia, China, and Türkiye become more reliable partners for those nations? And if so, what is the reasoning behind that?
It has to do with the baggage that France brings with it. Now, let us get one point clear, and that is the fact that France has left Africa, granted independence to its former colonies, but as of today, their currencies are still very much tied to the French economy. So which means that France may have left Africa, but in true sense, they haven't left Africa. Now, France cannot continue to expect that Africans will go blind to those facts. No, those facts have always been there. The social media has helped to actually project them so that the world knows more what is happening. Whereas Turkey hasn't got any colonial past with Africa. It is a Muslim country. A good number of African countries are Muslim. So there is this camaraderie, and Africans interpret, Turkish presence in Africa from the perspective of, mutual benefit. Now, I'm not confirming that that is the case, but at least there are very good reasons to believe that that is the case, and that is playing in Turkey's, favor, and Turkey is actually using its competitive advantage to drive home his message, whereas France has a very messy baggage, which they are finding difficult to get rid of.
So upon his return from Egypt, where he attended the COP27 summit, the French president announced the official end to its Barkhane military operations. And he said the move was the consequence of what they have experienced in recent months, and a new strategy would be needed. What kind of consequences is he talking about, and what will be the new French strategy there?
Now, it's the end of OPEX and the end of the Mali operation, where France was started as an army of liberation and was eventually seen as an army of occupation. So France has now withdrawn its troops from Mali. They're at the top of there used to be at some point 5,500 soldiers in the area. Now there's only 3,000 left, and they're based in Niger and Chad, especially. And this time, it's not part of an external operation led from France. The presence of these troops in these countries is based on bilateral security agreements, which is different. But France is still intent with these countries to help to keep on the fight against jihadist groups in the region, and hope that it will have less means to do so. But now it doesn't intervene in Mali as such, because now it's the Russians and the Malian army.
Yes.
And we can't say, and France can claim, that the situation has not improved in the region. Terrorist groups are developing, attacks are increasing in the region. So the withdrawal of France has not helped the security and the well-being of the Malian people, I think.
Yes, and that brings the question on who will be fighting these terror organizations. Gentlemen, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.